Hello, this is Case Ganem, and we are continuing the series of video interviews with members of the Canadian Authors Association. And today our guest is Sharon Hegel, who happens to be the current president of the association in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. So welcome to the interview, Sharon.
Well, thanks, Case. Thank you for having me.
Well, we would like to talk about your book and your interest in writing. But before that, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you go to school and what kind of education have you had so far?
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up in Toronto. Most of my schooling, my advanced education, I received as an adult after I had been working and raising children and so on. I took lots of courses. And finally, in my, I won't tell you what age I was, but after most of my kids were moved on, I went and got a degree in linguistics at the University of New Hampshire. We were living in the States at the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When you were at school, especially in kind of secondary school, did you do a lot of reading? Do you remember?
When I was in secondary school, I spent most of my time socializing. I had very little interest in academia, and I managed to skim by barely. So I don't remember a whole lot of reading at that point other than what was assigned.
Not even romantic novels or anything like that?
I went through a phase of that, but they all seemed the same. So eventually I lost interest in those, which is kind of weird, but yeah. It was only when I got older that I became fascinated with the whole idea of reading. And I really liked the, I like the 19th century authors. I just like the way they play with the language, so we seem to have lost that. So that was appealing to me. As a kid, I read the Nancy Drew mysteries and the Bobbsey twins and books like that, but we didn't have a lot of books around when I was a kid. My parents weren't readers. My mother read Mickey Spillane all the time, so it was either Mickey Spillane or the Bobbsey twins for me.
Okay. Were there any famous Canadian authors at that time, at that stage in your life, that you can remember?
As a teenager, in my late teens, I became aware of Margaret Atwood. And I think I was more impressed by her determination, the fact that she was a female writer and seemed to be breaking ground and so on. I have a lot of respect for her in that way.
Okay.
I think that was great.
Yeah, good. Well, she's certainly famous now. Let's talk about your book. Yeah. So, what is the title of your book?
It's called A Clear Range of Vision.
Clear Range of Vision.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at it. Can you?
Well, yes, I do. Have it right here.
Yes. All right. I'm just gonna.
That girl on the cover is my daughter who lives in the States. So, got my son-in-law to take a picture of her sitting on the end of one of those breakwaters.
Okay.
Because the character in the story actually does that.
All right. So, what is the? Give me a summary of what the book is about, and also tell us why you felt the urge to write a book like that.
I guess when I was a young mother and an adult, there was a lot of talk about the abuse of women. And it was before the equality issues came up and the feminist issues came up and so on. And that whole idea fascinated me. In the beginning, I was fascinated by the abuse itself. As I got older, I became fascinated with how do women survive that and how do they remake their lives in constructive ways. Because the fact is a lot of women who have gone through that turn around and put themselves back into a similar situation. So I think it takes a lot of courage to leave a situation like that, but it also takes a lot of character to overcome a situation like that. And in fact, the women who come through something like that are really suffering post-traumatic stress syndrome. And we didn't even know about that, in the old days when I was growing up. So that was I just wanted to look at a woman who had gone through that and to try and look at how she reconstructed her life.
You think that authors, when they write books of that kind, about, say, the abuse of suffered by a certain woman, they necessarily put in segments of their own lives?
I think we all, and I don't even think it's just women. I think everybody has to learn their place in society, and they have to learn to deal with other people. And that's not always easy. Some people are more bold about that than others are. So I think if you are not an aggressive kind of person, and I don't mean aggressive in a negative sense, I just mean having the self-esteem to put yourself forward in some way, you can easily fall prey to having someone else take over, you know, your decisions in your life and so on. And certainly there were a lot of women, as I was growing up or as I was raising children and working and so on, I'd meet these women, and you'd see women, you'd see doctors, you'd see lawyers, you'd see senior government people, you'd see clerks, who it didn't seem to matter your level of life or your economic level or whatever. You could find victims in all of those stratas. Mm-hmm. And I just found that fascinating. And I also found the idea of why do people stay fascinating? Why don't they just pack up and leave? And it's so complicated.
Okay. And how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say probably 10 years. I've worked about 4 years on it, and it was all on computer, and we had a major computer crash, and I lost everything. Okay. And you're a writer, so you know what that's like. Quite often an inspiration comes to you at 2 in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, or wakes you up in the middle of the night, and you run out and you write it. But you don't always remember it. And if the computer crashes, it's gone.
So you must have had quite a bit of apprehension about writing a book and certainly publishing a book. How did you overcome that? Did you also seek the opinions of your friends, and what were their opinions about your book?
I didn't talk about my book while I was writing it for a lot of when I was writing it until I got to the point where it looked like it was going to actually be completed. That's the other interesting thing, Case. One of the reasons I went to get a degree was because I wanted to finish something. I was a great starter, but I wasn't a great finisher. And I felt that way about the book. I wanted to finish the book. I wanted to be able to lift it up and say, I wrote that. So that was a challenge for me. Once I had the manuscript, then I went looking for people. But I think I understood early on that you can't just go to your friends and say, please read this and tell me what you think, because they all think it's wonderful.
They will tell you it's wonderful.
They will tell you it's wonderful, yeah. Exactly. So as soon as I had a finished manuscript, I actually hired a professional, and I hired Barbara Kyle, as a matter of fact, and asked her to edit it, and then I redid it again. And then when I had it the second time, I went to Cheryl Ward, who's a member of our branch, as you know, and she's a wonderful editor, and I had her do the second editing of it. Because I knew I was going to self-publish it. I knew I wasn't going to spend a lot of time trying to find an editor or an agent.
In fact, you may not even find one.
Well, that's the other thing. I felt, okay, I can either put my time and energy and money into publishing it, or I can spend my time and energy trying to find someone else to publish it.
Okay, and now that you have had it published, do you think that you have achieved your aims?
Yeah, I think I have, because if I become a one-book wonder, I don't really have a chance of attracting an agent or a publisher. So I need to get some more material out there. I have to have 3 or 4 books completed before I think any of those professionals are going to actually look at me as a writer or take me seriously as a writer. So for me to put a lot of energy in trying to promote this one book, I think would be a waste of my time. It would be better spent writing.
Okay, and tell us about the response and your success in selling your book or promoting it.
I had 200 copies published. I pretty much sold all of them. I did all of that within about the first 6 to 9 months after I published it. A lot of them were sold locally. I sold a couple online. There was someone in Hamilton that kept buying them from me. I could never figure out what they were doing with them, but same company bought 6 or 8 copies of it. I'm sure they're all over Asia now with no copyright marks on them at all. But
okay. Well, all of us writers, and this is for writers, we have this problem that we do not feel that we want to be rejected, our book, I mean, and we also are worried that our book may not be even worth marketing, and we have this fear that maybe we are too pushy, trying to persuade our friends and other people to...
We're our own worst enemies. In other
yes,
words,
you've been through that, eh?
Yeah, I think, to me, the best route is to get involved with a writing circle, because right away you're going to get feedback. And that's what we're all afraid of. We want people to love our book and love every single golden word that we put down on paper. And that's just not the reality. So if you can get someone who has some knowledge of writing to give you honest feedback, that prepares you for publishers and agents. Because you've already gone through the process of looking at what other people say about your book and deciding which part of it rings true for you. So, but it's true, most writers don't understand that there are two aspects to a writing career. One is the writer, and that's the creative part. And the other half is the business part. And if you're not prepared to do those, the business part, then you're going to have a lot of material stashed away in a drawer somewhere.
And did you have to get an agent?
I never looked for an agent, and I never looked for a publisher. I just felt this was something I was going to do on my own.
Okay. And are you planning a second book?
Yep.
Yeah?
The second book I have...
You're working on that?
Yeah, my problem is I actually have the beginnings of 3, and that's a big mistake, because trying to focus, every time I sit down to write, I'll work on one and then I'll work on another, and it's an impossible situation.
Do you mix up the characters?
No, I don't, none of that. They're all very clear to me, but I mean, you can't do that. It takes you a year and a half, maybe, depending on how quickly you write, to write a book. Well, if you're working on 3 at the same time, you're never going to get one done, so I know I have to focus. Okay,
a final question for you as president of the association in Ottawa. What advice do you have for budding writers?
Well, I guess my first advice is write. The second advice is get honest critique, because you're going to have to face it sooner or later. I think the third one is be true to your characters and be true to your story. Don't go looking out there to the market and saying, what's selling these days? Oh, it's vampire stories. I'll have to write a vampire story. You have to write from the heart. And you have to write something that's important to you and that has a message you think you want to share. And don't worry about the market. I mean, J.K. Rowling, there was no market for her material when she wrote it. She created her own market. I'm not saying that all writers can do that, but that's what you have to aim for, is be honest with your writing.
Well, thank you very much. That's very good, sound advice. And on that note, I want to thank you for appearing on the series of video interviews for authors in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. Thank you, Sharon.
Great, thank you.